I never understood fighting games. At least traditional side-scrolling 2D arcade-style fighting games. Your Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, all of that. I just never really got it. Like, I can see what's interesting about it. There's obviously a huge skill ceiling, but they just all look and feel the same to me. So sluggish and boring. For me, the fighting games I enjoy the most are the ones that have the most interactivity to it, in my opinion. Smash Bros has its platforming aspect and wider range of movement, and the Naruto Storm games, which I still believe are some of the greatest anime games ever made, just have so much more going on that's just so much more appealing to play. And honestly, I wasn't really bothered by it in the slightest. I mean, who cares honestly? I play my Super Smash Bros and you play your Street Fighter, all is fair. But then one afternoon I went on YouTube like I normally do, and I was scrolling through my recommendations, and then I saw these two characters, which I've never seen before, and for one reason or another, I clicked the video. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 OST Clock Tower Stage. That was the name of the video, and the second I heard the start of that song, I became entranced. There was something about the music, the thumbnail, and just the simple fact that I hadn't heard the game ever before. It just clicked something in my head that made me want more. To be quite honest, I really didn't think I would be ever making a video about this game. But for the past couple of months, this topic has been on the back burner, and I think it's finally time to dive into why I love this game, and how it's made me respect the art of arcade-style fighting games. But as always, we need to understand where it all came from before diving into it. It's December 1st, 1999, and Capcom has just announced a sequel to their ongoing fighting game series, Marvel vs. Capcom, originally being developed for the Sega Naomi board. Now, if you have no idea what that is, then you were just like me as I was writing the script reading up on the development history of this game. Apparently, Naomi stood for New Arcade Operation Machine Idea. It was this beefed up Dreamcast console, from my understanding, that was to be used in arcade machines exclusively. This thing had 4 times the amount of sound memory and twice as much system and video memory as a Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was supposed to be able to take these high quality arcade games and bring them to the home. A few months passed, and it's the turn of the century, and Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes debuts in Japanese arcades on the Naomi. On March 30th, Japan gets it on the Dreamcast, and North America would follow suit a couple months after, with them getting a Dreamcast release on June 29th. Eventually, it would even get ported to the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox 2 years later. The game's reception was green across the board, with pretty much every big video game reviewer touting it as among the best fighting games of all time. Even IGN, with their sometimes ridiculous claims, got this one right, with them stating in their review that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is among the best fighting games ever crafted. People and critics loved this game, besides the Xbox port of it for some reason. Metacritic wasn't very kind to that one. It surpassed expectations for newcomers and returning players alike, and I believe that the reason why it stood out so much was due to 3 main factors. These factors being the reasons why I even got hooked into the game, and why I believe you will too. The things which immediately make MVC2 stand out at that time. The first thing being the game's roster. My god, is it massive. With an astounding 52 character roster across the Marvel and Capcom universe. Each character being built up from the ground up, besides a few reskins, and some characters being completely original and originating from this game. Characters like Amigo, Ruby Heart, Sansan having such uniqueness and vibrant personalities to each of them. I mean, look at this roster, it's just perfect. Also, not to mention how astounding it was that they were able to pack such an extended roster, especially since in comparison to other fighting game rosters at the time. Melee only had 27, and 5 of those 27s are just reskins. Soul Calibur 2, another pretty renowned fighting game released in the early 2000s, only had 24. There are several other examples showing how big of an outlier MVC2's character roster was. The second factor I would like to bring up that makes this game stand out in the best way possible is its art style. I mean, just take a look at it. It looks like it was ripped straight out of a comic book. Bangus being the head artist for this game, and man, he just absolutely kills it with this game's art, with fans and critics alike praising him for his embrace of the comic book style. This with the 2.5D background really adding that certain aesthetic to it all. It's just all extremely pleasing to look at, if I'm honest. My third and final point on the bulletin board of why this game sticks out in the best way possible is this.
Ready?
This game's music is some of my favorite in gaming. Before I even start ranting on, I just have to say, thank you to Shida Shibata and Michishiko Takano for blessing our ears with this 30-minute OST. It's so oddly fitting with songs having breakneck compositions and then putting unintelligible vocal samples on top of that to characterize the world. You have every character on screen screaming some catchphrase every movement they do. You have the announcer in your ear, and to finish it off you have the loud jazz symphony, and it somehow finds its way to mix together beautifully. It surprises me that this game's music was one of the most common complaints I see brought up when reading reviews of it. It genuinely amazes me that people find flaw with it after hearing songs like River Stage, Clock Tower, even Desert Theme, just to name the few that came to my head first. There isn't ever a quiet moment in this game, either be the main menu's banging drums and guitar riffs, or the more sweet sounding Try Again theme. It bewilders me that there wasn't ever a physical release for this game's OST. I can guess that it was due in part to the OST's bad reception at launch, which is beyond a shame. But enough about me just talking about everything but the most important part, and that being the gameplay. To put it simply, this game is beyond fun, but my god, is it unbalanced. When it comes to almost every online discourse about this game, the one thing that is constant is mentioning how broken it is. The amount of broken infinites in this game alone is bewildering. I don't have the patience nor the skill to learn these, but if you are curious, here's an amazing tutorial on how to do one of them.
Yo, you wanna learn how to do a fucking infinite? I'ma teach your motherfucking bitch ass. Easiest shit in the motherfucking Marvel 3, Marvel 2. Fuck it. I don't give a fuck. Iron Man. Alright, jump up in the air, hit up fucking heavy kick, nigga. And then it's motherfucking light punch, medium punch, light kick, heavy punch. Let's start this motherfucker off right. Ow, 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 ow. Drop that shit. Redo it, motherfucker! Oh! Oh! How's it tight?
Besides talking about balancing, the game's core 3v3 gameplay is just fantastic. Especially considering how huge the roster is, you just have this big playground to mix and match characters to find which teams suit you the best. It adds a lot of depth to it that keeps the main arcade mode fun to replay time and time again. Talking about modes, the game is split up into 4 main modes. Arcade mode, like I just mentioned, is where you make a team of 3 and go against a gauntlet of AI-controlled teams leading up to a boss. Versus mode is your standard PvP mode. And then you have training mode, which is just, well, training, and score attack where you try to reach a high score. Just in general, stringing together combos, blocking, and even the movement feels so fun and lively in this game. Even mechanically it's sound, as the majority of 90s and early 2000s fighting games were. They struck the perfect balance of just busted fun but also mechanically excellent. The community itself has pushed each character to their absolute limits on how effective they can be. You think that a game that quite literally has everything going for it, a huge roster, amazing music and art style, and fun broken gameplay would have quite the longevity and support that a game like Melee even. But sadly, MVC2 wouldn't be as lucky. If there's one thing that upsets me the most about Marvel vs. Capcom as a series is the game after MVC2. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, even though it isn't a bad game, it's just stylistically the personification of why I didn't even give 2D fighting games a chance in the first place. It just looks so bland and basic, even with the comic book style, I guess. It looks just like any other 3D fighting game. That lack of individuality and just personality makes me pretty sad considering how the game before it was just the complete polar opposite. Maybe it was the rough transition to 3D, but even the game after that, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which has been touted as a stain in the series with its inconsistent models, weak roster, and weak presentation overall. Capcom would, however, give MVC2 a re-release in 2009 to Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network, but would get taken down from each of those platforms in December of 2013. That would be the last legal way to play the game, with it not being included in any sort of collection nor any digital re-release since then. It was pretty evident that the sudden takedown of the games from the marketplaces was due to Capcom's licensing contracts with the Marvel Comics expiring. The only possible ways of playing it in the current day is having either the original copies or emulation, and emulating this game is quite the hassle. I've attempted emulating it through Naomi, and that is a whole mess in itself, but I found the most success emulating it through the Dreamcast version. which probably is the best version of any of the console releases outside of the Xbox 360 and PS3 digital ones. Which brings me to how surprisingly active the community is. People like the fighting game legend Justin Wong, who consistently make content about the game. Communities like this are the reason why games like MVC2 aren't simply lost to time, and we're all the better for it. To me, Marvel vs. Capcom New Age of Heroes did something that very few games can do. It made me respect a genre that I honestly dismissed for the majority of my life. It showed me how vibrant and unique 2D fighters can be and made me more willing to try other stylistic fighters that I had been hesitant to play for the longest time. All in all, my final verdict is to just play the game. You won't regret the ride it'll take you on.